Good.
Jeff, as you look back at the season, kind of what were your biggest takeaways?
I mean, I think, there's a lot to take away from this season. I think we learned a lot about our team this season. When I think about our season, I go to the window of time right after the trade deadline where we had this lengthy homestand, and we kind of looked at it as an opportunity to kind of, get our bearings and kind of enter the last part of the season on the right track. And I'm going to get it wrong, but I know that we played one of our worst games of the season and got shellacked by Cleveland, beat Washington, had a couple heartbreaking losses against good teams, Memphis and Golden State, where we had, I think 17, 18, 19-point leads late in the games, second half, and then lost both of those games. And then had the last three games, we lost by a total of 5 points, and that's over a 2-week period. And in the interim of that, we find out that Jalen's out for the season, So here you are kind of taking like body blow after body blow, and then you get this, bad news in the midst of all that. And I've been around a while, and I haven't seen a whole lot of just piling on like that, And I thought that was going to be a real telltale of how our team responded. And so what do? We go on one of our more daunting road trips, and we open up by winning at Milwaukee, and we close the trip by winning at Cleveland. And to me, when I think about this season, I think a lot about that window of time. And I think about what we learned about our team and what our team went through and how we showed ourselves. And, it's funny. I think about last season, winning 13 more games than the previous, going into the playoffs. And it was kind of like a magic carpet ride, We were healthy. We played well. We overperformed expectations. We showed well in the playoffs, and really didn't face any adversity. And I look at what we did this season. Had we taken care of those games on that homestand, we'd have had basically the same record as last year. We ended up in the same place. We can talk later about injuries and how they affected our team, but I look at this team, what we went through this year to get to the playoffs, to perform well in the playoffs. Not well enough, but to perform well in the playoffs. And we really had to fight a lot. And I think this year, way more than last year, aged us. We earned battle scars, and I think it told us a lot about who we are and where we are as a team. And to me, that's instructive what we have to do next.
Where do you think this team is, and what do you think needs to happen next?
So I think that, we've talked a lot over the years about kind of following our North Star and running kind of, 2 races at the same time and the trickiness of navigating all that. And I think that, what we've learned about our team this year is that, it's time to enter the next stage of our development, which is when you go into these things, that's what you can't wait to get to this day, right? You want to acquire enough talent, develop the talent, see the talent grow up and come together. And this year I felt, like I said, like that we were more battle tested than we had been, and we acquitted ourselves well. And so I think we're in a place now where, the focus will shift to more of looking at the world through more of a win now sort of lens.
Jeff, what does a win now player, what does a win now move look like for this team?
Well, I don't know. You guys know the process. We have to go through the draft. We have to understand the value of the picks, where we see opportunities. We have to connect with teams. We have to go to Chicago and see what the marketplace is going to bear. I can't tell you what form or fashion that'll take, but I know that those are our kind of goals going into the summer.
Does this team need an old guy?
Older than me?
Probably not, because we're going to need several minutes a night.
Yeah, I feel that, when you say an old guy, I feel what we need is proven, proven shot making, proven offensive play, someone that's going to come in and help augment our weakness. Clearly we need to get better offensively. Clearly we need to shoot the ball better. And so, those are, I think, the goals. That's the lens that we need to look at, as we enter the postseason now. And, I don't think anything's off the table. Veteran help, proven offensive help is what we're going to be looking for.
Kind of on that point, this team has been built on its defense. They had the number 2 defensive rating in the league this year. How do you balance maintaining that North Star, that this team's identity, with finding the right offensive help and kind of adding that to the chemistry in the mix?
I mean, that's a very relevant question, right? That's the question, because as you guys know, I think that a lot of stuff gets bandied around even at the trade deadline. Names, players to try to acquire. But as we've been talking about for years, and I've been saying, like, the train is coming for all of us. Well, it pulled up to our station this year, so we've now joined the rest of the league regarding our financial flexibility, right? So most of our roster upgrades are going to have to come more through swapping than just adding. And so to your point, Philip, I mean, it's a great question, because the reason that we've been a good team the last couple of years, and I do believe we are a good team, the reason is because we've got an elite defensive backbone. And as we look to improve our offense, we have to be very cognizant about, like, not unraveling the DNA of our team. And that's going to be what we have to balance this summer.
Jeff, when you look at Boston, Tatum and Brown, a number of years advanced in their career, Powell and France, just kind of starting out, does their kind of development path follow a blueprint for what you'd like to see for this team?
Yeah, I mean, we've modeled a lot of different teams, and obviously Boston kind of is a natural fit for us because of Tatum and Brown. And I think that I'm hoping that we've got the right guys on the roster. I believe in them, and I do think that you have to continually remind yourself where our guys are relative to, the trajectory of NBA careers. I do believe that we have, 2 guys on our team that'll be all-stars, maybe all-NBA, and that, we'll continue to get better and better. And we have a whole host of other guys, along with them. But when you think about what our team is, this team, before we even upgrade it, this team is going to look like, and we're going to go through different roster looks and different machinations over the coming seasons, and try to address our weaknesses. But these guys are going to look completely different in a few years, and that's the beauty of kind of going through the rebuild. If you get the right guys, it kind of becomes the gift that keeps giving, because I do believe that the value of kind of following our North Star the last several years and really not compromising around developing those guys is going to show up for years to come, while we improve the roster in other areas.
When you evaluate this team, how much do injuries play a factor when you're looking at the totality of the roster?
Yeah, I never want to rely too heavily, when I talk to you guys on injuries, because it sounds like excuses. Our job is to evaluate the team and improve the team. You can't evaluate the team without acknowledging how injuries impact the team. So, Jalen Suggs plays 97 minutes, I think, with our 3 best players play 97 minutes together, right? We're 3rd in the league lost wins to injuries, behind Philadelphia and New Orleans. And obviously they kind of recalibrated their goals as they got hit by injuries. So, when I think about a Jalen Suggs, when I think about, losing our 4 best offensive players, at different stages of the season, and the way you have to constantly reinvent yourself and figure out a new way to play and a new way to win, and then another one comes. And it's been a very, trying season. I think we acquitted ourselves well, but clearly, if I say we're going to upgrade the roster, but before we even do that, we get to add a healthy Jalen Suggs back, I mean, to me, that's very exciting. I hope our fans are excited by that. So we have to evaluate how injuries affect that. Injuries pull at your shot quality. They pull at your ability to turn defense into offense. They pull at a lot of different things, and that's part of what we have to evaluate.
Jeff, it's now back-to-back seasons exiting in the first round of the playoffs. You talked about win now. It's been a long time since the Magic have made it out of the first round. Is that added pressure to get past that first round while you still have Franz and Paulo at a very young age?
Well, I think, the way that you ended that question to me is the most important part. And I'll say that probably most teams didn't have us doing what we did last year, so maybe the timetable got a little advanced by that. I don't feel the pressure of having to do this or that. I feel the pressure of having to run the best version of our own race. And I feel that we have enough talent and fit, and if we do that, that other teams will be trying to keep pace with us.
Will you offer Paulo an extension this summer, and if so, what's your pitch?
Well, I won't get into those sorts of conversations. We have free agents and team options and that sort of stuff, and I feel like that stuff is best kept between the team and the player. But obviously, we're ecstatic to have a guy like Paulo on our team, and we hope he's our Magic for a long time.
When you do envision the next iteration of this team, whatever that may look like, when you're obviously considering building around two guys like Powell and France, do you consult with them or their representation at all about what would best help them with this team?
Well, look, we always want to know what our players are thinking, and have the read the room right and have our finger on the pulse of the team. I won't get into kind of more private behind closed doors conversations with our players. Obviously. Their impact on our team is felt in a lot of different ways, and we pride ourselves on understanding what the temperature of our team is, what the pulse of our team is, and all that stuff means a lot to us. But I'll kind of leave it at that.
Jeff, when we spoke after the deadline, you said you felt like teams were trying to squeeze you. What is different about the offseason, and why do you think that won't happen this year?
Well, look, Jason, like first of all, look, that's the nature of this league, right? Everybody squeezes everybody. That's the nature of it, And maybe I misspoke to use that word. I mean, when you go into the trade deadline, when you go into the summer, everyone's looking to squeeze. Everyone is looking for weaknesses, Achilles heels, leverages, ways in, So that's the water that we swim in as an NBA team. I think when I look at the trade deadline, and I ask myself about it a lot. I understand where we want to get better. Ultimately, because of our financial situation, and I think this wasn't really brought out front during that period, we were mostly looking at expiring contracts. And so by definition, kind of to use the vernacular, like a rental player. And a player that we weren't sure if we'd be able to retain going forward. So I say, the first question you have to ask yourself at the deadline is, at what cost? At what cost? And we were looking to augment the roster. We were looking to add some depth for the playoffs. At what cost? And, the price got a little uncomfortable for us. And so we decided to kind of keep our assets in our back pocket. And I will say that, like, having gone through the rest of the season and seeing the way that our team grew and seeing the way that we problem solved, which is a huge part of this league for a young team, I'm glad to have those assets in our back pocket now as we enter the summer and kind of like know more about our team. I hope we did the right thing. I'm not sitting here telling you that I own, the truth or righteousness, but I hope so. And I am excited about, what we saw for the remainder of the season. I am excited that we have all of our assets going forward.
So you feel more comfortable this offseason using those assets?
Well, so I think, kind of alluding back to one of the earlier points is I think we're ready to kind of walk into the next phase of our team, the next stage of our team. And it's more of a win now philosophy, a win now approach, I think. And so with that, I think maybe to be less protective of, picks and future assets, to look at what we can turn into winning now. Obviously summer is I think most teams would say is the time you want to make more transactions because the league allows you a lot more flexibility with adding roster spots, like to exceed the number that you can have during the season, and obviously how much do you want to change your team during the season while you're in the midst of playing games, and especially with our team through this season, like we had the uncertainty of Jalen's injury kind of hanging over our heads during the deadline this year, so. Yeah, I definitely think that the summer is if you have your choice and given your druthers, you'd always rather do those things over the summer.
on that point, you've mentioned multiple times in the excuse me, multiple times in the past that continuity is only worth keeping around if it's leading to success. In this new win now phase of this team, how much incentive is there to keep continuity with the team?
Yeah, I think there's always an incentive to keep continuity. I think that the more you can keep, the better. However, you also have to understand when you have the luxury of doing that. Maybe at greater times than others. So I think that when you enter kind of like the next stage of where we're going, if that has to be something, again, you talk about defense for offense and all the different kind of sliding scales. That's another one that we have to contend with, and I think that we'll keep as much of it as we can. I mean, we love the group of guys that we have here. They've been successful. I think, as I said, they problem solve, which is a really big part of the NBA. I think we matured in a way this year that we haven't in previous seasons, and kind of are a much more battle-tested, kind of aged team. And that's just another element of roster building, is how much of that can we keep going forward.
Kind of on that point, last summer you guys had a lot of cap room. You spent it on a big free agent, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. He obviously didn't have the season that I think he hoped for, expects of himself. What did you see from him, and why do you think maybe he had some of the struggles that he had, kind of finding his rhythm on this team?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that goes into that. That's a really, kind of short question with a long answer. I think the first thing is that the first place I have to start is what we tried to do when adding Kenny was to increase our shooting and increase our defensive DNA. And I think that, on the latter point, he made us a much better defensive team than we even already were. I think he's an amazing guy. He plays games. He plays hurt. He's a terrific defender. He really helped us, I thought, kind of be who we were in the playoffs. And I expect more of that going forward from him. Obviously, he didn't shoot the ball the way that he hoped to, but more importantly, the way that he has over the last 5 seasons, coming in. So what accounts for that? And I think these are questions that we've been asking ourselves. It's not just him, it's our whole team. We had a roster of guys that shot career lows. What accounts for that? Is it just adding a shooter? Is it adding a playmaker? What unlocks our existing roster, and how do we best add to that roster to fix ourselves offensively, to fix our shooting production? I do think that, kind of getting back to the earlier question, you have to look at how injuries affect that. The expression, you are what you eat. Well, there's a direct link to shooting percentage and shot quality. And I can tell you that our shot quality deviated wildly this year, depending on, what time of the season you're asking about and who was on our roster. We had a point during the season when Franz and Paulo were off the roster where we were last in shot quality. And by the end of the season, when they came back and found their footing and our team kind of figured out a way to play, we were number 1 in shot quality. And I don't think it's a surprise to see that, we went from 31% to 35% from March 1st through the rest of the season because of that. That's not good enough. We have to get better. But there are a lot of ways to, improve, a team's shooting. I can't help but believe that Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is not an elite NBA shooter. Obviously, the results of our whole team did not show that this year. So we have to understand that, and we know we have to get better there.
So the playmaking of Powell and France went up this season. How much flexibility does that give you, knowing that you got 2 guys on the rise that can create for others?
Well, I think you guys know that, we're building through those guys, and I think that it's kind of a unique, ability to look at a roster where, you're playing through 2 6'10" guys who, as I said earlier, even as they grow up, 22 and 23 years old, what are they going to look like in a few years? And I think that provides a lot of opportunities for us to, build the team in a unique way. That being said, I think that playmaking, veteran leadership, the ability for us to kind of get into our stuff, I thought Corey showed some of the value of that, towards the back end of the season, getting us into our stuff, getting the ball over the court quickly and organizing our team a little bit. So I do think there's value there. And again, is this part of why, our shooting numbers picked up? the back half of the season. You know, I think there's a lot that goes into all these things. They're all interconnected. Clearly, Franz and Paulo have, you know, exceptional skill sets for their size, their IQs, and the way that they see the game and the way that they make other players around them better. But we need to add a lot more offensively to get this team where we want it.
They both faced extended absences this year, kind of the first major injuries of their young careers. How do you think they handled kind of dealing with being out, dealing with coming back and kind of finding their footing, and how much better do you think that will make them moving forward?
Yeah, again, I say we learned more about our team this year, in my opinion, than we did last year. We went through so much this year. And I think that the way that we finished the season and the way that we acquitted ourselves in the playoff tells me a lot about who we are and more importantly, where we are. And I think those guys are great processors. They're super competitive. They're ridiculously hard workers. They care about winning. They have all of their priorities aligned the right way. And for guys 23 and 22 years old to be able to have all that wherewithal, I think is extraordinary. You know, and it's going to be the foundation of our team.
Jeff, how much has your longevity with the organization contributed to this sense of urgency that you have right now? Does that have anything to do with your mindset, the fact that you've been here 8 years?
Zero. I don't consider myself part of that. I feel that it's our job to, you know, put the players in position to succeed and understand where they are and understand where we need to get better, how to get better, when to get better. And so I'm just so proud of the way these guys manage their adversity this year, the way that they solve problems, the way that they came together through extraordinary circumstances, and the way that they closed the season. And I think that it's telling us that, you know, we're ready to put our foot on the gas. We're ready to kind of enter the next stage of our team. You know, I just hope that, you know, I have so many talented people around me in the front office, talented coaches. You know, they say surround yourself with the smartest people. And so I'm really excited about what this summer is going to bring. I know where we need to get better, or at least I feel we know that. And so, you know, we're eager to kind of dig into that. But it has nothing to do with me. It's all to do with the trajectory of our team.
How would you evaluate Jamal Mosley's job this year, and what do you need to see from him in the future?
Well, I think that anytime you look at a team, it's the old expression, a team takes on the personality of its coach. And I just looked at how much we had thrown at us this season, you know, constantly. I mean, a coach's job is to provide consistency and stability for its players, right, for his players. And, you know, that means asking, you know, defining roles. It means knowing when guys are going to get on the court. It knows who are they going to be playing with. And we just never had any baseline stability to that. So the coaches, Mose and the staff, were constantly having to like reinvent what it was for us to play winning basketball, you know. And to say that they fought through that, they battled through that. You know, we finished the season 10-4. We made the playoffs. We acquitted ourselves well, not well enough, but well. And you know, I get back to, you know, what I said. You know, a team takes on its coach's personality. So, you know, we fought, we problem solved. So I think that says a lot about Coach Mosley.